Hey guys, it's Thursday, November 23rd, 2023. It's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Um, I'm going to do the Books and Burpees video. This is from Simone Triggs-Gesser. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing your name correctly, my friend. If not, I apologize. Um, Most likely, I'm mispronouncing it. To be fair, most likely, I'm mispronouncing everyone's name. The challenge that Simone put out was to not so much a book review as to buy a book. This is how I'm going to do it. I have two books that I recently purchased, and instead of giving you a book review as I'm in the middle of one, the other one I started and put aside, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Instead of doing a book review, I'll tell you why I bought them. And we'll start with the one that I am reading now. This is, you're going to see it backwards, Merton's Palace of Nowhere, and it is by James Finley. James Finley is a former monk, former Christian monk, who at the age of 18, right after high school, he went to Kentucky to join a monastery under the tutelage of Thomas Merton. He had the good fortune of having Thomas Merton as his mentor, as the senior monk in the monastery that he was at. And for those who don't know, Thomas Merton is a towering figure, not just in the monastic movement of Christianity, but he studied and wrote quite extensively on Eastern philosophy, and he was one of the first people to wed those two together, which in the 1960s was no easy feat, actually from the late 50s all the way up. He also wrote The Seven Story Mountain, which is his um, autobiography of his beginning years, why he went to become a monk, why he decided to live a contemplative life. Um, James Finley spent 6 years at the monastery, and then he left. He left the monastery, gave up his vows, had a family, went back to school, became a very wise psychologist and writer. This is, though, the distilled wisdom of the 6 years he spent with Thomas Merton, um, put into a 147-page book. Um, I am a big fan of Thomas Merton. I've been talking about him quite a bit recently, as well as other Christian mystics. And the reason I bought this book was to immerse myself more in that world, in the world where stillness is a prized pursuit. Finding yourself in stillness, finding yourself in what Herman Melville talked about when he said that silence is the only voice of God. It's been a while since I've actually used the language of God. Never left me, but I had a preference of saying more, using terms of life and reality, um, Buddhahood, Christ consciousness, because God seemed like such a loaded term. And to say reality is the same as saying God. To say life is the same as saying God. It just seemed easier. But more recently, I have felt more called back to expressing it in those more personal tones that I used when I was younger, going to a Catholic school. I am not a Christian um, any longer. I didn't leave Christianity for any specific reason other than I felt like I expanded past it. The yogic Buddhist philosophy seemed better suited for my temperament. However, there's a deep, deep love for the contemplative practice of the mystics of Christianity, a very deep love. And I felt the urge to immerse myself back in, hence the book. And The language is a return to that language of Christianity of the past, of a contemplative Christianity, which is different than what you might find in more modern takes of Christian writing. It is, you would find this to be akin to reading the Bhagavad Gita, or reading commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, or the Upanishads, or the Dhammapada of Buddhism. The mystics speak a common language across all spectrum, no borders, no boundaries. So I'm very much at home with the theme, but the wording itself is a little different. So that's why I bought this book. Second book, Breaking Together, Jem Bendell. I put this book aside. I was eager. I saw an interview with Jem on Buddha at the Gas Pump, which is one of my favorite podcasts. Rick Archer has been doing this for several years, his podcast, and he featured Jem. And I loved the podcast, and I was eager for the book. The book is a freedom-loving response to collapse. And that's what it's about. The collapse, societal collapse. It's not fiction. It's brutal honesty that we are beyond the point of repair for societal collapse due to environmental damage. He is a scholar. He's done a ton of research on this subject. He has not just his own research, he has led research teams. He's an expert on this. And not only that, he has dealt and talked with other experts across the scientific spectrum. And they've all said the same thing, that it's beyond that point. That now, instead of talking about reversing climate damage or even mitigating, it is time to talk about how we're going to live with it. To me, that's bleak, because I'm an optimist. And I thought, man, we have time. We can change things. We will change things. I became a vegan partly, not just ethically as far as the cruelty to animals with the agribusinesses, but as well as because it's a small thing that I can do that affects the environment. So again, I'm optimistic about the changes that we can make, but even just beginning this book and the bleak picture that it paints, I had to put it aside for now. I will come back to it, even if it means reading just a few pages a day to get through it, because he's an optimist as well. Even in the bleak picture that he's painting, he is telling us how we can live with that damage. Again, not mitigate it, but how we can live, and not only live, how we can learn to thrive in a world that is, as he says in the subtitle, collapsing. What can we rebuild? Because it might be too late to hold on to some things. Some things aren't worth holding on to. It might be time for a new society of cooperation, of care, of kindness, of empathy, of honoring each other and our planet. And this book is a blueprint on how to do it. But first, you got to get past the bad news. That's why I bought this book. Was not for the bad news, but to the inspiration of coming together and building something new, all of us, that we can honor, that fits in with the environment. I think that'd be pretty awesome if we can do it. And I think we can. So that's why I bought these two books. And that's why I'm reading one deeply now, the other, again, put aside, but I'll be back. Now, having said that, these are the two books that I recently bought. They actually just came. I'm reading some others at the time. I'm always in the thick of several books, although I try to give one the majority of my attention. And then when I'm done, I give the next one the majority of my attention and I move through them. I am also reading Original Goodness by Agnatha who was a Hindu um, who came to America in the 1950s in the Fulbright Scholarship. And he is he taught English literature, surprisingly enough. He had a deep love of English literature, but he also taught meditation in Berkeley in the 1960s and the 70s and the 80s through the 90s when he passed away. One of his methods of meditation was one of the first forms of meditation that I took up as a discipline daily without missing it. And he is the one who brought me back to Christianity through the mystics. So it's odd that a East Indian Hindu English literature collegiate professor brought me back to the mystical traditions, mystical branches of Christianity. I'm rereading his book, Original Goodness, which is his commentary on the Beatitudes. And it's beautiful. The Beatitudes themselves are beautiful. It is the deep practice of Christianity, the Beatitudes themselves. So if you're a Christian and you wonder, is there a way to practice in the same way that people practice Buddhism, in the same way that people practice true yoga, real yoga? The answer is yes, and it's explicitly explained in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Beatitudes. I'm also reading How to Know God, which is a commentary written by Christopher Isherwood, who's a fantastic writer. And he was a student of Vedanta. And this is the commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It was published in the late 1950s, I believe. I've had it for 30 years, probably. And I've read several other commentaries on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. For whatever reason, though, I never got around to reading this one after 30 years. And finally, I decided, picking it up, reading through it, but never cover to cover, I finally decided to do so for whatever reason. Sometimes books call you and you don't know why, and they can change your life. And I've had several books. Maybe we should do a talk about that sometime. What are the books that literally changed the course of your life? So, in closing, I want to say a couple things. Books. We think of them as inspiring us, expanding our thoughts, changing our lives, and they're all of that, most definitely. But you know what? Sometimes they're just comfort. Sometimes a good book or a long familiar book, something that we've read over and over again, or a genre of books that we like, it's enough just to feel good. It's enough to have that comfort. It's like an old friend. I have paperback westerns that I've been reading since I was a kid, and they bring me back to that wonderful feeling of being a kid, going to the bookstore with my parents and being able to pick that book out. So, every book that you read, no matter what it is, no matter the theme, no matter the genre, expands you in some way, even if it's just making you happy, even if it's just bringing you a sense of comfort. Simone, thank you. This was a wonderful thing for you to put out there. Very much appreciated, and I'm honored that you included me right off the bat. So, to put it out there, Derek Towers, Osiris, still in the game, Tony. If you guys, let's throw in Duncan Walsh, just for fun. If you guys would like to participate, no pressure. Just pick the books, the new books, books that you want to read, books that you just purchased, books that you're in the middle of now, or even just finished, and talk about it any way you would like. The theme here that we're doing, books and burpees. fitness and the mind, um, overall well-being for all of us. So again, if you guys would like, that would be awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you, Simon, and I will talk to you guys later. Enjoy your Thanksgiving.